As Nehru said in his speech, and I quote, "A moment comes, which comes but rarely in history, when we stop out from the old to the new, when an age ends, and when the soul of the nation, long suppressed, finds its utterance. It is fitting that at this solemn moment, excuse me one moment. It is fitting that at the solemn moment, we take the pledge of dedication to the service of India and her people, and to the still larger cause of humanity. India is a beautiful nation in every sense of the word, from its vibrant cultural landscape to its many religions to its biodiversity. In many ways, it's a heritage to be proud of. As Nehru said in his speech, freedom and power bring responsibility. He noted right at the birth of the nation, we have hard work ahead, and that there is no resting for any of us till we redeem our pledge in full. As true patriots dedicated to the ideals set for us by one of India's proudest sons, we know that there is still so much work to be done. India has made phenomenal progress as a free nation, but it has also faced and continues to face challenges, especially from within. As America's largest and most influential organization dedicated to India's constitutional ideals of pluralism, secularism, and liberty for all, IAMC is celebrating this Independence Day to uphold our identity as proud Muslims, citizens, and descendants alike, with a long history and beautiful culture that we have been a part of for centuries in India. We celebrate the India that can be and the India that should be. We're here to reclaim the spirit of India, which 74 years ago today was declared to be one of justice, pluralism, and tolerance. Our program today is divided into two segments. So as you can see on the slides, we could show the agenda. So we'll be having two different segments. The first will be covering the role of Muslims in India's freedom struggle, and the second will be discussing the idea of India and what is at stake in our current times. So before we start our first segment, I'd like to call on IAMC National President Syed Afzal Ali. Brother Syed is one of the co-founders of the organization. He has served in various capacities as board member and vice president, and currently he's the president of IAMC. So Brother Syed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sister Sabah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah, assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I'd like to start off by thanking our volunteers and our staff for putting together this program. And I welcome all of you to this virtual celebration. As Sister Safa mentioned, my name is Syed Ali, and I am the National President of the Indian American Muslim Council, the oldest and the largest Indian American organization that is dedicated to upholding the constitutional mandates of freedom, liberty, justice, and equality in both the United States and in India. On behalf of the Indian American Muslim Council, I congratulate all Indians as well as their friends and well-wishers on India's completion of 74 years of freedom from British colonial and imperial rule. The 90-year-old liberation struggle that started in 1857 under the leadership of the last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, eventually culminated in India's independence under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi in 1947. Muslims have contributed a lot to the freedom struggle in India and also to its culture, cuisine, arts, and literature. Soon you will hear from our esteemed panelists about the freedom struggle and the freedom fighters that are forgotten, or in some cases, their sacrifices are deliberately ignored. It is indeed a great feeling to see the progress India and its people have made in the last 74 years. Indian citizens continue to make sacrifices to build the nation of India. In many respects, India has made tremendous progress. India is now a fast developing country. Since independence, its economy has grown faster than many countries and now ranks in the top 5 countries in the world, which helped raise millions of Indians from below the poverty line. And the standard of living of millions of Indians has risen since 1947. This is something to be celebrated. On the historic day of 15th August 1947, Indians assembled at the stately building in Delhi that would later become India's parliament to hear their first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru speak to the newly liberated nation. But even as Pandit Nehru delivered his historic speech, 77-year-old Gandhi, who was widely hailed as the father of the nation, was busy 1,000 miles away in the eastern city of Calcutta, courageously risking his life to douse the mad sectarian violence among Hindus and Muslims that had claimed the lives of thousands in both communities. Indeed, for a year from before independence, the subcontinent had suffered widespread communal violence from Bengal to Bihar, from Delhi to Punjab, and elsewhere too, as the British had raced to divide and exit India. Through the year, Gandhi boldly traveled through the length and breadth of the strife-torn regions to drive sense into Hindus and Muslims to give up the bloodshed and to live like brothers as they had for centuries. Less than 6 months after Independence Day, Gandhi would be assassinated by Nathuram Godse, a fanatic Hindu nationalist who believed that Gandhi's efforts to bring peace, brotherhood, and friendship between Hindus and Muslims were detrimental to the interests of India's Hindus, and he was therefore better dead than alive. Godse's belief emerged from an ideology first pronounced by his guru, Vinayak Savarkar, back in the 1920s, that considered non-Hindus, especially Muslims and Christians, as aliens to the land and not deserving of equal rights as citizens of India. Savarkar's ideology inspired the formation of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, in 1925, which would over time become the frontispiece of a Hindu-only xenophobic ideology. By many accounts, Godse had been a member of the RSS, even though the RSS denies it today. And when Gandhi's assassin, Godse, walked to the gallows after being sentenced to death, he sang the RSS anthem. Even Savarkar was accused of being a co-conspirator in Gandhi's assassination, but was let off on legal technicalities. As India's first Home Minister, Sardar Patel, a disciple of Gandhi, noted at that time that RSS members had celebrated Gandhi's murder by distributing sweets. When India adopted the saffron, white, green, tricolor national flag, the RSS rejected it, saying that green represented Islam and only saffron was the Hindu color. When India adopted a pluralist constitution in 1949, the RSS rejected it, saying that India's constitution should be based not on modern principles of equal rights, but for all, equal rights for all, but on ancient Hindu scriptures. It is remarkable that 74 years later, India finds itself at exactly the same crossroads as it did in 1947, battling two opposite ideologies of Mahatma Gandhi on one side and Vinayak Savarkar on the other side. It is true that at the moment, Savarkar's ideology appears to be winning, with India's ruling party, the BJP, being a subsidiary of the RSS, and India's Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, a self-avowed Hindu nationalist, being an RSS member from the age of 8. It is widely acknowledged here in the United States and across the Western world that Prime Minister Modi's tenure since 2014 has seen a phenomenal rise in violence against Muslims and Christians across India. Attacks on and killings of Muslims has become the norm, unfortunately. Mosques and churches are routinely vandalized and often demolished, even as the police stand by. Tens of thousands of Muslims have been incarcerated across India under the worst of charges, such as sedition and terrorism, without any evidence. India's criminal justice system has utterly failed to deliver justice and, in fact, treats the victims as criminals. Numerous US senators and members of Congress have raised concern at Prime Minister Modi's new citizenship law and plans to create a dubious citizenship register that aims to turn millions of Muslims into stateless non-citizens, doomed to incarceration in thousands of Nazi-style detention centers that India's federal and state governments are already building. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, an autonomous federal body set up by the US Congress, has already recommended 2 years in a row that the US State Department designate India as a country of particular concern, which is a category of the world's worst offenders of religious freedom. Leading global watchdogs such as Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Freedom House, the Committee to Protect Journalists, and the Cato Institute have all recorded the severe decline in India's democratic values under Mr. Modi. Just last week, members of Mr. Modi's BJP party raised blatantly genocidal slogans calling explicitly for massacres of Muslims. Ironically, the people who were shouting these slogans had assembled less than a mile from India's parliament, the same building where Mr. Nehru had delivered his speech 74 years ago. So what does India's current situation portend for its 200 million Muslims and 30 million Christians? Where does India go from here? Is the India that Gandhi and Nehru dreamed of already dead? Is India now at the cusp of becoming a Hindu nation or a Hindu Rashtra, the stated goal of the RSS for a century? It is important today, at the anniversary of India's independence, to recall the prophetic words from Nehru's speech on that day. Allow me to quote him at some length. Quote, "We have worked hard. There is no resting for any of us till we redeem our pledge in full, till we make all the people of India what destiny intended them to be. We are citizens of a great country on the verge of bold advance, and we have to live up to that high standard. All of us, to whatever religion we may belong, are equally the children of India with equal rights, privileges, and obligations. We cannot encourage communalism or narrow-mindedness, for no nation can be great whose people are narrow in thought or in action." For decades before freedom, Mahatma Gandhi himself had laid a clear vision of how members of all faiths will coexist in a free India. Writing just 2 weeks after independence, Gandhi had said, "The state is bound to be wholly secular. All subjects will thus be equal in the eye of the law. But every single individual will be free to pursue a religion without let or hindrance, so long as it does not transgress the common law." A month later, he reiterated, "My one aim with respect to the Hindu-Muslim question is that the solution will be complete only when the minority feels perfectly safe, even if they are in the minority of one." Throughout his life, Gandhi simply and repeatedly said, India cannot exist without its Hindus or Muslims. I am convinced that I speak for hundreds of millions of Indians, Hindus, and Muslims who believe in a composite and secular India, that no xenophobic ideology can possibly survive in India in the long run. As it were, the ideology of Hindu nationalism was formulated even before the Second World War and clearly has no place in the modern world. The lessons of modern history, especially since the end of that big war, is that exclusionist xenophobia is a destructor of nations and societies. Only pluralism and the rule of law ensure peace, justice, progress, and the well-being of any nation and society. As the great Urdu poet Faiz Ahmed Faiz had said, "Dil na ummeed to nahi, naakaam hi to hai. Dil na ummeed to nahi, naakaam hi to hai. Lambi hai gham ki sham, magar sham hi to hai." And as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Brothers and sisters, in the end, I would like to invoke one of the greatest Indian patriots, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, a Muslim who determinedly opposed India's partition and exhorted India's Muslims to choose to stay in India. Right after independence, speaking to thousands of Muslims at Old Delhi's historic Jama Masjid, Maulana Azad said, quote, "I want to remind you that these bright etchings which you see all around you are relics of processions of your forefathers. Do not forget them. Do not forsake them. Live as their worthy inheritors. Rest assured, if you do not wish to flee from this scene, nobody can make you flee. Come, today let us pledge that this country is ours. We belong to it, and any fundamental decisions about its destiny will remain incomplete without our consent. Brothers and sisters, I do not have a new prescription for you. I have the same old prescription that was revealed to the greatest benefactor of mankind, the prescription of the Holy Quran. Do not fear and do not grieve. If you possess true faith, you will gain the upper hand. Unquote. India is the country of 200 million Muslims, as much as it is the country of its 1 billion Hindus or 30 million Christians. There is no power on earth that can deny all its children equal rights to the motherland. As the children of Islam, we Muslims have not a shadow of doubt that we will fulfill our destinies as the children of India, rightfully securing our place in its destiny. Let no one doubt that India will eventually eventually overcome and defeat Hindu nationalism. The nation of Gandhi, Nehru, and Azad cannot and will not fail their legacy. Happy Independence Day, everyone, and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Brother Sayed, for those very eloquent remarks. So we'll now be getting started with our panel session on the role of Muslims in India's freedom struggle, featuring our two distinguished guests, Dr. Shamsul Islam and Mr. Syed Ubaidur Rahman. And this session will be introduced and moderated by Mr. Ajit Sahi, investigative journalist and director of advocacy for IAMC. So Mr. Sahi, I'm passing the mic over to you.
Thank you, Safa. Thank you, Afzal Bhai, for that wonderful speech. And a very happy Independence Day to everyone. I'm honored to be joined by Dr. Shamsul Islam, who has been a longtime friend. Dr. Islam and I, we go back now 35 years, back in the middle of 1980s. We've known each other. We've worked on campaigns together. It's absolute delight to be with you, to welcome you, Dr. Shamsul Islam, and Brother Syed Ubaidur Rahman. I'll just take a very brief moment to introduce the two of you. Dr. Shamsul Islam, as many of our viewers might know, has taught at Delhi University for decades. I have, of course, I connected with him.
Louder, please. A bit louder.
Sorry?
A bit louder, please.
Louder, yes. Okay. So Dr. Shamsul Islam has taught at Delhi University for decades. He's also a tremendous author. He has researched the subject of many subjects actually connected with India's politics, India's freedom struggle. He's a street theater activist, researcher, as I said, of religious nationalism, women's issues, persecution of Dalits. He has written several acclaimed books on Indian history and the RSS, including Know the RSS, Muslims Against Partition of India, and RSS, Marketing Fascism as Hindu Nationalism. His presentation that you will see now is titled Joint Heritage of Joint Martyrdoms. And our other distinguished guest is Dr. Syed Ubaidur Rahman. He is a journalist and an author. He has also done tremendous work. His books are such as Biographical Encyclopedia of Indian Muslim Freedom Fighters, as well as the ulama's role in India's freedom movement. So welcome, both of you. Dr. Islam, let's start with you. Why don't you start your presentation? We will split it about 10 minutes for both of you, and then if time permits, we will have questions and answers at the end of it.
Right, okay. Thank you, Ajit Saab. Dear friends, my heartiest greetings to all of you on the 75th Salgira of the independence of our democratic secular India. It's a matter of great joy that our country, the largest democracy in the world, has survived despite many serious threats from outside and inside. However, with the believers of Hindutva politics coming to power, our country is faced with one of the most critical challenges never faced, never witnessed in independent India's history. These rulers are bent upon polarizing the nation by declaring that only Hindus, that too who believe in the Hindutva politics, can claim to be the rightful children of India. Moreover, they miss no opportunity to denigrate Muslims and Christians, the largest majority, Muslims being the largest majority of the country, which is also the third largest Muslim population in the world. The saddest part is that those elements are questioning the right of Muslims to be Indians, who forget about being part of the democratic secular India, secular nation building, aggressively opposed its formation. They decried and backstepped the all-inclusive freedom struggle as it did not agree to the establishment of a Hindu state. but a democratic secular polity. This gang openly sided with the British rulers for its belief in the two-nation theory, that every religion constitutes a separate nation. They killed even father of the nation, Gandhiji, for daring to stand for India, which would not discriminate on the basis of religion, caste, and gender. Dear friends, the Hindutva elements are able to spread hatred against Indian Muslims as we let the actual memories of the shared sacrifices and shared heritage become obscure. That I would be through my slides that I would try to explain before you. This loss of memory turned Muslims into a pathetic lot. We seem to be living in India on the Rahmo-Karam of the Hindutva gang, as if we are at their mercy, and will we stay in India or survive in India? That depends on their goodwill. Anyway, I am grateful to IAMC for reviving interest in the glorious heritage of the shared sacrifice of Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and followers of all other religions, which gave birth to a democratic secular India 3/4 of a century ago. My dear friends, I also want to stress on this fact that so far as contribution of Indian Muslims is in building India of our dreams is concerned, Muslims have consistently punched above their weight in numbers or their status in the society, contributing to the glorious story of shared sacrifices. We should never forget the number of Muslims, the population about before independence 21%, and after that 14%. With the freedom struggle, they put in far beyond sacrifices in their number and their status in this society. There is not an inch of the land of India where Muslims with other fellow countrymen have not nurtured by their sweat only, but by blood. They nurtured Indian motherland not by sweat only, but their blood. The Muslims were integral part of the building of the modern India from the beginning of the process which got rolling with the 1857 War of Independence. Indian Muslims should be proud of this heritage and should not be defensive. Before I start my presentation, I would like to add two more things. That Muslims, when we talk of role of Muslims in the freedom struggle, we do not mean that only Muslims were participating in the freedom struggle. They were shoulder to shoulder with other country fellow men and women of all religions. They were fighting for a common cause. And the second is that they had no sectarian or separate project, but the project was an all-inclusive India, to give birth to an all-inclusive India. My dear friends, I would take you to some of the slides, and right. This is the first one, that मुश्तरका कुर्बानियों की मुश्तरका विरासत वाला हमारा मुल्क भारत है. India, our nation of shared sacrifices and shared heritage. And of course, I would like to thank Humayun Sahab, who, in fact, I had sent my slides with the text. He put in very impressive pictures and photos relating to these texts. Moreover, I also would like to share the fact that when I'll be bringing facts about 1857 and later different milestones of our freedom struggle, I'll be relying on the contemporary documents only. So, dear friends, the other thing is that when people say, when Hindutva criminals say that India belongs to only Hindus, they must know how India came into being in ancient times even. And I quote one of the greatest poets of India, Janab Raghupati Sahib Firaq Gorakhpuri Sahab. He wrote, "Sarzameen Hind par aqwam-e alam ke firaq, kafile baste gaye, Hindustan banta gaya." I hope some friends will understand this Urdu poetry, but I'll also translate it. In this land that is India, groups from many nations of the world kept settling. That is how India kept emerging and assembling itself. I take you back to to 1857, which started the process of the building of modern India. And, 70% armed Hindu Sipahis, Hindu soldiers, forced a Muslim king who was, in fact, whose rule was restricted within Lal Killa, that fort, forced him to take charge of as an independent ruler of India. And the song which they wrote for independent India, I think you must listen this in the original Urdu song, which was by Azimullah Khan Sahab. हम हैं इसके मालिक हिंदुस्तान हमारा पाक वतन है कौम का जन्नत से भी प्यारा. Will friends be understanding this, or I read the translation? Sayyid Ali Sahab, what's your opinion? Shall I go ahead with Urdu recitation?
आप ट्रांसलेशन भी पढ़ दीजिए.
हाँ, ट्रांसलेशन भी पढ़ दीजिएगा.
अच्छा, ट्रांसलेशन करना पड़ेगा
अगर आप कर सकते हैं तो जी.
हाँ, but that will time consuming, right? Right.
ठीक है, आप उर्दू में पढ़ दीजिएगा. हम
सिर्फ उर्दू में पढ़ दें, most of the people understand.
ये हमारी मिल्कियत हिंदुस्तान हमारा, इसकी रूहानियत से रोशन है जग सारा. कितना कदीम, कितना नईम, सब दुनिया से न्यारा. It appeared in a newspaper of Delhi, 13th May 1857. कितना कदीम, कितना नईम, सब दुनिया से न्यारा, करती है जरखेज जिसे गंगो जमन की धारा. ऊपर बर्फीला पर्वत पहरेदार हमारा, नीचे साहिल पर बसता सागर का नक्कारा. इसकी खाने उगल नहीं, माइंस उगल नहीं, सोना हीरा पारा. इसकी शानो शौकत का दुनिया में जयकारा. आया फिरंगी दूर से ऐसा मंत्र मारा, लूटा दोनों हाथों से प्यारा वतन हमारा. आज शहीदों ने तुमको अहले वतन ललकारा, तोड़ो गुलामी की जंजीरें, बरसाओ अंगारा. हिंदू मुसलमान सिख हमारा भाई प्यारा प्यारा, ये है आजादी का झंडा, इससे सलाम हमारा. अजीमुल्लाह खान साहब ने लिखा. And I also want to draw your attention to a fact that when Britishers had besieged Delhi and revolutionaries had declared independence of Delhi as capital of independent India, what was happening, what was the level of unity between Hindus and Muslims, you could understand by an anecdote that a new artillery gun, big new artillery gun was to be introduced on the morcha, on the front. So what was done, and that was done was that only artillery gun only. What was done, that Maulvis were invited, Hindu priests were invited, Hindu priests performed Aarti, and Maulanas recited Quran Sharif. So that kind of, and Bahadur Shah was present there. And all the defense council, which consisted nine members of defense council, in which 4 were Muslims and 5 were Hindus, they all were present there. And that kind of unity, my dear friends. And today Ayodhya remains a very big friction point between Hindus and Muslims. And I tell you again, relying on the contemporary documents, how Hindus and Muslims together laid down their lives there. Maulana Amir Ali was a renowned Islamic scholar, and Baba Ramcharan Das was head of the famous Hanuman Gadi, which is even today is there. And they both organized an army of Hindus and Muslims, and they won many battles, but due to the treachery of local Hindu and Muslim Nawab and Rajas, especially Raja of Amethi, they were caught and they were hanged together at a tamarind tree. इमली के पेड़ पर उनको कुबेर टेला, जो आज भी फैजाबाद में उस पर उनको फांसी पर लटकाया गया. They were hanged. And another, these were not the exceptions. And another 2 friends, Achan Khan and Shambhu Prasad Shukla, they were part of the Raja Devi Baksh Singh's army of Gonda. They also had liberated Faizabad and the surrounding areas. Due to the treachery of these stooges, they were caught. And Britishers were so scared of the Hindu-Muslim unity, in order to terrorize, they skinned them. They skinned them and then hanged them on a tree and did not let anybody remove their bodies. And another, the kind of examples of the kind of great examples of Hindu-Muslim sacrifices, I would like to take you to Hasi, Haryana. It is in Haryana there was a person, very renowned literary figure, mathematician Hukum Chand, and his friend Munir Beg. They organized the revolutionary army in the Haryana area that is towards west of Delhi, and both were caught and hanged in Jhansi on January 1858. But the most
Dr. Saab, we have a couple of minutes for you.
Acha, right, okay. The most shocking thing was that Munir Beg was put on a pyre, was put on a chita, and Hukum Chand Jainji was buried because they wanted to insult Islam, followers of Islam, and followers of Hinduism. And another, I'm just rushing. I did not know that I will have only 10 minutes. Anyway, I was told it would be 20 minutes long. But anyway, Jhansi, we know about the sacrifice of Rani Lakshmi Bai. But we do not know that his chief of artillery, Ghulam Ghaus Khan, and his cavalry were Khuda Bakhsh. And they had sacrificed their lives 1 month before the sacrifice of Rani Lakshmi Bai on April 4 at Jhansi Fort. And the day, that is 17 June, Battle of Kota Ki Sarai, where Rani was martyred, the Angrez officer who found the body of Rani Lakshmi Bai, he shared the fact that a Muslim lady who was her personal security officer shadow, she was lying dead on the body of martyred Rani of Jhansi. Anyway, I am skipping Malwa, where Maulvi Fazlul Haq led army, saved a huge army which had been attacked by behind of Tatia Tope Rao Sahab, Prince Maulvi Fazlul Haq and Zahur Ali. They stood as a rock and allowed the army which had been attacked from behind to go, and they sacrificed. How many sacrificed? These were more than 450 army men led by Maulvi Fazlul Haq. And then Khan Bahadur Khan and Khushiram in Rohilkhand, that was liberated, and Khan Bahadur Khan and Pandit Khushiram with 243 Hindus and Muslims were hanged in Bareilly on February 24, 1860. And Khan Bahadur Khan, before being hanged, declared, "I was bound to accomplish this task of liberation of the motherland. It was a noble cause and I am proud of it." And then I think last one from me, Thana Bhawan is about 200 kilometers from Delhi. 14 Hindu, Muslim, Sikh women laid down their lives together. Asghari Begum, Asha Devi, Bakhtawari, Bhagwati Devi, Habiba, Indar Kaur, Jamila, Mam Kaur, Rahimi, Raj Kaur, Shobha Devi, Umda, Bhagwani Bibi. And then Jallianwala Bagh, 381 martyrs, 202 Muslims, 96 Sikhs, 63 Muslims. The whole land of India, the motherland, is being आप उसको सींच रहे हैं. उसको किससे सींच रहे हैं? अपने खून से. चोरा चोरी February 4th, 1922. 18 people hanged, 14 Hindus, 5 Muslims. Kakori martyrs, Ashfaqullah Ram Prasad Bismil, Rajendra Lahiri, Thakur Roshan Singh. Between 17th and 19th December 1927, they were hanged in 4 different jails. And then I also wanted that one of the greatest massacres, which very few know, because most of the martyrs were Muslims, Khudai Khidmatgars, 80% of them were shot dead on April 23, 1930. Udham Singh, you must never forget that before he was being hanged in London, he declared that his name was Muhammad Singh Azad. Yani Hindu-Muslim unity was being reflected in the sacrifice of Udham Singh, who says that my name is not Udham Singh, my name is Muhammad Singh Azad. We do not know this history, we do not know this heritage. And let me also finish with the thing that Inqilab Zindabad, the Nara, long live revolution, was given by Maulana Hasrat Mohani Sahib. It was popularized by revolutionary Bhagat Singh and his band of revolutionaries. But the giver of this slogan was Maulana Hasrat Mohani. And then, sorry, Ajit Bhai, last one, Azad Hind Fauj, which was formed by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Second in command and third in command were both Muslims, Lieutenant Colonel Zama Kiani and Lieutenant Colonel Ehsan Qadir. That is a fact. So rulers missed no opportunity to destroy this great heritage of shared sacrifices. On the eve of 75th independence of India, we must take pledge of remembering and upholding this glorious heritage and not let the RSS BJP rulers of India undo it. Mere pyare dosto, since most of you are Muslims, what I want to share with you, then don't be defensive. आपने आपकी जितनी आबादी है, आपका जितना नंबर है इतिहास में 1857 ऑनवर्ड, आपका जितना हैसियत है इंडियन सोसाइटी में, इंडियन नेशन में, उससे 3 गुना, उससे दुगना आपने इस देश को बनाने में अपना खून दिया है. अपना पसीना नहीं दिया है, खून दिया है. और आप despite that you are at the lowest pedestals of the prosperity of the Indian nation. और जो who pose no challenge to the Hindus, they are presented as the culprits and as terrorists. Come out of your inertia, please. Tell everybody, tell your family members, tell your friends, tell your children that you have contributed more than your weight in building this, and we will not let this go to the dogs. The criminals who did not spare even Gandhi, the criminals who did not spare M.M. Kaulburgi, who did not spare Gauri Lankesh, who did not spare the great historian Pansare, Narendra Dabholkar. So we will not let this country die. And with Hindutva gang around, India does not need any foreign enemy. They will undo India, but we will not let, as the largest minority in league with the secular Hindus, secular Christians, secular Sikhs, and Dalits, we will defeat them surely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shamsul Islam, for that absolutely amazing presentation. In the interest of time, I immediately move to Bhai Syed Ubaidur Rahman Saab. Please go ahead, sir. Take your time, and we look forward to hearing from you as well. Thank you. आप म्यूट पे साहब. Rahman Bhai, you are on mute. You will have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you.
Is it fine now?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Ajit Bhai. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi Asif wa tamim bil khair. Dear friends, salam and adab. It is my privilege to be talking to you on this important occasion. Indian Muslims' contribution in India's different phases of freedom movement was huge. They played larger than life role and gave great sacrifices for the cause. From last Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar to Nawabs, princes, landlords of all sizes, ulama and the common people, they all stood for the cause, took on huge challenges and sacrificed almost everything for it. Thousands of ulama were slaughtered in the wake of 1857 uprising. Entire Delhi was emptied of Muslims and they were not allowed to return back to their homes and reclaim their properties that they had built after a lifetime of hard work and struggle. Be it 1857 mutiny or the later freedom movements, Muslims have played leading role in all such efforts. British officials and historians have accused Muslims for the 1857 mutiny. To be true, both British historians and the officials have named Muslims as the most important rebels and termed the mutiny as a sinister plot by Muslim ulama to reclaim their lost powerhouse in the country. In many places, Muslim ulama and Sufis gave the call for jihad long before the actual outbreak of Badr in 1857. Ahmadullah Shah was preaching jihad in Agra long before mutiny. Only when the fighting started, his supporters broke open the Faizabad prison. Similar was the case of Maulvi Liaquat Ali, who took control of Allahabad during 1857 and was proclaimed the governor of Allahabad by none other than the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar. Maulvi Abdullah Shah and Maulvi Liaquat Ali were not the only ulama who played prominent role during the 1857 mutiny. Maulvi Sarfraz Ali, is one leader whose role has remained shrouded in mystery. It is said that Maulvi Sarfraz Ali was a spiritual mentor of Bakht Khan, who rose to become the commander-in-chief of the armies fighting the British Army in Delhi and its surrounding places. Sarfraz Ali has been called the Imam of Mujahideen or leader of the rebels by many people. He was a known face in Delhi and enjoyed trust by the Mughal court. It is said that he was persuaded Bakht Khan to march to Delhi and take on the British armies engaged in fighting against the ragtag mutineers in Delhi. After coming to the capital, it was Bakht Khan who brought some iota of discipline in the ranks of the rebel armies and made them fighting fit. Not just Muslim ulama and Sufis, Muslim Nawabs, landlords of all sizes, common Muslims too fought valiantly and gave all sorts of sacrifices. Nawab Tafadul Hussain Khan of Farrukhabad had to pay a very heavy price for his full support to mutineers. His estate was seized and he was sent off to Hijaz, where he died in absolute penury. Nawab Abdul Rahman Khan, Nawab of Sijjar, was sentenced to death and executed by hanging at the Delhi Kotwali on December 23, 1857. His estate was also seized. Nawab Fazil Ahmad Khan, the Nawab and Jagirdar of Ambapani near Bhopal, was one of the leading leaders of the freedom movement during 1857 mutiny. When the rebel forces were defeated, the Nawab was captured along with 18 of his close associates and was executed by hanging over the gate of Rahatgarh Fort. His estate was seized. Nawab Ahmad Ali Khan, the Nawab of Farrukhnagar too, had to pay a heavy price for his support to the revolutionaries during 1857 mutiny. He was arrested and charged with rebellion and treason against the British. He was sentenced to death and executed in November 1857. Muslims' preeminent role in 1857 mutiny may be the reason that the British government singled the community out for the worst sort of revenge. Thousands and thousands of ulama were hanged to death. Many others, when the British hangmen got tired, were simply taken to a secluded place and shot dead from point blank range. Others, like Muhammad Baqir, were tied to cannon and blasted into a small pieces. When the British forces reoccupied the city in 1857, they were given completely free hand in killing Muslims and pillaging their properties. If that was not enough, military ordered that the residents of the city were to be immediately evacuated. Their houses and businesses were to be impounded. This must have been the worst scenario, where people of Delhi were forced to leave the town that was so painstakingly built by their forefathers and forefathers over a period of centuries, and where they had lived all their lives. It is said that out of hundreds of thousands of Muslims living in Delhi, only Mirza Asadullah Khan Ghalib, the renowned Urdu and Persian poet, was allowed to leave. And it was thanks to the generosity of Maharaja of Patiala, a supporter of the British colonial rulers who had sent forces to support them, that he survived the looting, pillaging, and killing of Muslims. While the entire town was emptied of the residents, both Hindus and Muslims, the Hindu residents of the city were allowed to return in 1858, while Muslims were kept out for another 2 years. Muslims' houses and businesses were seized by the army as confiscated property. There is no denying that Muslims were presumed to be the real conspirators behind the 1857 mutiny, and subsequently they faced the full wrath of the colonial government by virtue of having their places of worship and other symbols of power seized and occupied as barracks by British troops. Jama Masjid of Delhi, the huge mosque where we enjoy praying so much, was turned into army barrack, where Sikhs sepoys were kept for several years before it was handed back to the Muslim following a long negotiation process initiated by Mufti Sadruddin Azurda. Masjid Fatehpuri was sold off to a Hindu businessman, and it took years before it was released after paying huge sum for it. In Kucha Cheran, a Delhi mohalla that was the center of art and academia at the time, the slaughter was complete. 1,400 people, including renowned scholar Imam Baksh Sahabai and his sons, who were equally very well-known scholars, they were slaughtered. Edward Vibert, a young British officer, says the forces were ordered to kill everyone. Quote, I was literally murdered. It was literally murder. I have seen many bloody and awful sights lately, but such as one as I witnessed yesterday, I pray I never see again. The women were all spared, but their screams on seeing their husbands and sons butchered were most painful. Heaven knows I feel no pity, but when some old grey-bearded man is brought and shot before your very eyes, hard must be the man's heart, I think, who can look on with indifference. Unquote. What happened in Delhi was repeated in almost all the strongholds of the rebels. All rebel strongholds, including centers of the town, were flattened, people massacred, and their homes and properties confiscated. Muslims not just took the lead in 1857 mutiny, they remained in the forefront in all of the efforts to topple the British colonial regime in the country as well. Reshmi Rumal Tehreek of Maulana Mahmud Hassan and Maulana Ubaidullah Sindhi was a complete Muslim effort to topple the colonial rule. When the British intelligence finally got rid of it, hundreds of sympathizers of Reshmi Rumal Tehreek were arrested and thrown in prison for years without any trial. The entire top leadership, including Maulana Mahmud Hassan and half a dozen of his disciples, were bundled off to Malta after a sham trial where they endured the worst hardship under very tough circumstances. Muslims were in colonial struggle too. From Justice Tayyib Ji to Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, there were as many as 9 Muslim leaders who became the president of the Indian National Congress. Not just Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru and Patel led the freedom movement, Muhammad Ali Jawhar, Shaukat Ali, Maulana Azad, Dr. Mukhtar Ansari, Hakim Ajmal Khan, Maulana Mahmud Hassan, and many top-of-the-line Muslim leaders were equally respected and hugely popular, who gave every possible sacrifice for the cause of freedom movement. Without them and their sacrifices, it is completely unthinkable that the nation would have won freedom. Thank you. As I conclude, I would like to add here that if you want to support our cause and what we are doing, you can contact us on our mobile number 9818-327757 or email us at sayyidurrahman@gmail.com. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you,
Thank
Syed
you.
Rahman Saab, for your wonderful presentation. And we will surely share your details, including your phone number and your email ID with all our participants here. And best of wishes. Jazakallah khair for your enterprise. Thank you so much, Dr. Shamsul Islam, also for making that presentation. I do not see any questions here. So I will, in the interest of time, I'll just pass it back to Sister Safa. Thank you so much.
Jibbai, Sister Safa, before we move on, I think we got a lot of requests for the presentation from Dr. Shamsul Islam. So Dr. Shamsul Islam Sahab, we have your permission to send out your presentation if for people who are requesting.
Yes.
Thank you.
All my writings are free of copyright.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair. Sister Safa.
So I want to reiterate the thanks to both of our panelists for those amazing and insightful presentations and for taking the time to present them to us in such a thoughtful manner. So we appreciate your time and wisdom, and we'll now be moving on to our second segment, which is speaking about the idea of India and what is at stake. And we've got several video messages pre-recorded from prominent Indian activists and leaders. But before we get into those, I'd like to introduce my co-MC, Amina Ahmed. Amina is a social activist and talk show host, and she'll be introducing the speakers for each video.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you to everyone who has joined us here today for such an amazing and important event. And, you know, for the sake of time, I will just get straight into the speakers list. We have a phenomenal list of speakers, and starting off is Faiza, who is an activist from the Indian state of Kerala. She did her master's from Jamia Millia Islamia and was involved in activism against the discriminatory CAA. And we will play a video from her right now.
Before we start the video, I just wanted to remind everybody that, inshallah, after this segment, we have a virtual flag hoisting ceremony and then also a singing of the national anthem. So please make sure that you stay tuned for that later. Jazakallah khair. We can't hear the audio. Mudassir bhai, we can't hear the audio.
Assalamu alaikum. It's been 75 years since the independence of India from the British occupation. And it's pretty sad and disturbing how we are not in a position actually to celebrate anything here. I mean, anybody with a sensible mind would agree that this country is in a really unfortunate situation right now. I mean, look around, it has fallen apart already. The government has stopped being accountable to its people. The government is literally attacking and threatening its people. It's completely in ruins almost. So it is in this scenario that we are discussing the idea of India and what is at stake here. So normally when you discuss or when you talk about the idea of India, we kind of relate it or we kind of associate it with all these notions of, secularism, unity in diversity, communal harmony, and all of that. But I would like to point out here that it is high time that we reject all of these notions of a secular country that once existed and now something has happened and it's all in ruins. When you look into the history of this country, at least for the Muslims, this has never been a secular state. This has never had any, democratic values. This has never been just to its Muslims, to its Dalits, to any of its minorities for that matter. So it is very important that we understand that this has never been a secular democratic country. This has always been, what has always existed is a Brahmin state. So it is also important because, we are not fighting any fringe groups here. We are fighting the very idea of Brahmanism. It is this very idea of Brahmanism that is depriving, that is exploiting the Dalits, and that is brutalizing, criminalizing, and terrorizing its Muslims. So our fight, it is very important that because this fight is going to be really long and this struggle is going to be really difficult, it is very important that we know what we are fighting. We should know who is our enemy. It's not some fringe groups. It is this very idea of Brahmanism that we are fighting against. And in a Brahmin state, you can never exist as a Muslim. You can never exist as a Dalit. So, and again, we are discussing here about the contributions of Muslims in the freedom struggle. And that is also very important that the Muslims of this country and anywhere need to know that this country was built with our blood and sweat too. So we need to know that because we have been fed with this distorted history where we are the traitors and we have been, feeling sorry for our Muslim identity for so long. So we need to, stop that right now, and we need to know that this country belongs to us too. And now, coming to the next part, what is at stake here? Now, again, we cannot just go on and say the secular values of this country is at stake. No. What is at stake here? Most importantly, of course, there is a lot of things that are at stake here. There is justice is at stake here. Human rights is at stake here. But most importantly, what is at stake here is the existence of its minorities. It's our own dear lives that are at stake here. See, there is rape threats going on. There is calls for genocide. A pogrom just happened, and there's Dalit girls are being raped. And what is causing all of this? And all of this is happening. It's important that even in international platforms we discuss what is happening in India, all the human rights violations that are happening in India. But it is also important that we actually talk about the cause of it. What is causing all of this, and why is it that it is being facilitated in India? Why is it that the concerns of the majority community, why is it that they choose to look away when all of this is happening? So it is very important that we actually address, it's high time that we actually address the cause of why all of this is happening. Only then can we at least dream of building a society where there is democracy, where there is, where human rights are not violated, and most importantly, where there is justice.
An extremely passionate, words that we saw from Faisa. And I think this is kind of a theme that we see, that all of these speakers are passionate because we're at a time where, it is a critical time right now in history. I think that this is the time that will go down. Next, we have Nabia Khan, who is a Delhi-based poet and activist who rose to prominence during the anti-citizenship bill movement. She's a prominent face of Indian Muslims on Twitter, and she uses her social media to bring attention to issues of human rights and religious freedom. Recently, she was amongst dozens of Muslim women listed for auction on an app by a Hindu right wing, for which she has waged a legal battle. Nabia Khan will be up next.
Today is a day when perhaps more than any other day, you think, you question yourself
Mahendra, can you please go on mute?
what
Sorry.
India is to you. The idea of India, as we call it. And it is unfortunate that it is nowhere close to what India is today. मेरा जो आइडिया है इंडिया का, वो एक ऐसा आइडिया है जहां हर एक इंसान को इक्वल हक मिले, जहां जुल्म ना हो, जहां ट्रू सेंस ऑफ द वर्ड में, where every person has the equal access to opportunities, not the one where Muslim, Dalits, Adivasis, women have been pushed backwards. Where hate for the marginalized other motivates more than any other thing, where minorities are crushed, when so many injustices are happening, it becomes difficult to still hold on to that idea. आज के इंडिया की में जिंदगी की कोई वैल्यू नहीं, लाइफ की कोई वैल्यू नहीं, हिंदुस्तानियों की कोई वैल्यू नहीं है. वो अभी हमने रिसेंटली कोविड क्राइसिस में देख ही लिया अच्छे से. गवर्नमेंट ने अपनी ड्यूटीज फुलफिल करना तो दूर, जिम्मेदारी तक नहीं ली. I mean, a nation is by its people, not by the land. जब इंसान का डेवलपमेंट होगा तभी किसी देश का डेवलपमेंट हो सकता है. So for me, people are the important. The idea of my India will be realized when there is no majoritarianism, no toxic nationalism, no hunger, no sexual violence against women on the basis of caste, class, and religion. And it's really disheartening when you see that your country has become the total opposite of what you thought it to be. I mean, it is really overwhelming. So, I mean, I don't even want to recall that incident. I call this country, I call India my country. And in the same country, I was recently being virtually auctioned online. There was an app called Sulli Deals on which Muslim women were auctioned online. So it's really sad that Muslims are facing this in India right now. And people recently gathered in the national capital. 5,000 people gathered in the national capital of India, and and promoted anti-Muslim hatred and Islam ki vinash ki baat ki gayi. So this is so shameful, and all this happened in the national capital right before the Independence Day. हमारी आजादी के दिन से थोड़े दिन पहले. So, I mean, the contemporary idea of India is based on Nehruvian secularism. It is where the Indian identity takes precedence over the multitudes of cultural, religious, and linguistic identities that have shaped and thrived in the last 70 years. So, my idea of India is an India where people of all the religion, caste, class, gender, regions have the same equal opportunities and not just one section of people. My idea of India is, of course, is one that is democratic and inclusive, but all democratic values are at stake because the idea of India, of the majority of people, has become the majoritarian borderline fascist India. हम देख रहे हैं इंडिया में क्या हो रहा है अभी लोगों को जय श्री राम जबरदस्ती बुलवा कर उनको सड़कों पे मारा जाता है, लिंच किया जाता है, थ्रैश किया जाता है. So I mean this idea calls to kill people from minorities, to kill people from Muslim community, and these calls are made publicly without any shame, with full impunity from the state. And nothing much is done against this. Privileged people are okay with it, they are silent and they are complicit. So everything that a civilized nation is based on is at stake. I would say that the social fabric is at stake. It is completely burned. I mean, India now is a hate manufacturing nation. And that was all. But before leaving, I would like to recite one of my poems that I wrote a few years ago, in the hope of good times. And I still hope for the good times. I would like to recite that poem here, which goes like, ये नफरत की अफसरदा सियाह रात हो जाएगी रोशन उल्फत के चरागों से. ये नफरत की अफसरदा सियाह रात हो जाएगी रोशन उल्फत के चरागों से. ये जहालत का शोर जो वाबस्ता है हर ओर. ये सुबह है नशाद, ये जुल्म सितम की बात टल जाएगी नाराए इनकलाबों से. ये जो नासूर है जुल्मत में पेवस्त और ये फक्र फाकों के जमाने, हो जाएंगे ये दिन भी रिहा कफस के अजाबों से. हर जानिब है सरकशी का आलम, हर तरफ धुआं गलाजत. ये खाके वतन, ये खिजाए चमन खिल जाएगा मसरत के बहारों से. ये जो करते हैं तुमको वतन बदर, ये जो करते हैं तुमको वतन बदर, ये भटके हुए इरादे, ये गुमनाम लोग. कोई इनसे पूछो, कोई इनसे पूछो, डरते नहीं है क्या ये अदल और सितम के हिसाबों से. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. इनकलाब जिंदाबाद, आजादी मुबारक.
Beautiful, beautiful poetry written by and recited by our sister Nabia, and she speaks
Indeed.
eloquently about how, you know, what her expectation of India is, what many of our expectation of India is or was, and what India is today, right? That comparative nature of all of this, the fact that India should be a country that is equal for all people, that is just, and what we are seeing today is the total opposite of that. So hopefully we'll hear more about the situation in India today and what the future can look like if we all work together, by Dr. Zafar al-Islam Khan, who is a scholar, journalist, and the former chairman of the Delhi Minorities Commission. He's worked extensively on minorities' rights, and he's a respected scholar and intellectual across India. He's been vocal against all forms of extremism, and he has spoken out against right-wing extremism and violence against minorities in India. Today, Dr. Khan will talk about how the rise of BJP in India have put the very institutions that, you know, our sister Nabia talked about, that make up the country's democracy, you know, at stake. So Dr. Zafar al-Islam will be next.
The party came to power with big promises and claimed to work for progress of all, but what slowly unfolded was a policy of hate against the two main minorities in the country, Muslims and Christians. Pressures on Christians ceased within the next 2 years, apparently due to foreign pressure, but continued against Muslims. It took many forms and shapes, like lynchings in the name of beef and cow slaughter or smuggling, so-called love jihad, and the so-called plan to convert Hindus to Islam, so-called Muslim conspiracy to raise their numbers in India, etc., etc. A section of media was reined in to start periodic campaigns against Muslims using any stray or fake incident, like claiming that Muslims were on purpose spreading corona in the country. Ruling party leaders, MPs, and even ministers went around making inflammatory and irresponsible speeches. They were never even reprimanded for their incendiary statements. Using this hate 24/7, the ruling party has kept Hindus busy and distracted from its colossal failures on every front. So much so that despite these failures, it again won the general elections in 2019. This time it started implementing its long-term plans, like depriving millions of Muslims of their Indian nationality in the name of implementing NRC, CAA, leading to months-long huge Muslim protests all over the country, which could be curbed only using the COVID pandemic restrictions. Next came the unilateral abolition of the Article 370 of the Indian Constitution and converting the huge Jammu and Kashmir state into a union territory and snatching away Ladakh from it. India's great institutions are being weakened, diluted, and made subservient to the ruling Hindutva ideology. Lynchings, open anti-Muslim propaganda, and calls for murder of Muslims have become common. Indian government is not moved by widespread national and international condemnation of these policies, so much so that when the visiting American Secretary of the State raised the issue of human rights in India, his Indian counterpart shot back that we are correcting historical wrongs. A huge surveillance system has been installed, keeping an eye on what citizens say and think. Thousands of people have been arrested on sedition, conversion, beef, and fake terror charges. Recently, the Pegasus scandal has exposed the huge surveillance network this government has built to tame India's once vibrant civil society. This surveillance system and spying in various ways focuses not on criminals and terrorists, but on secular critics and people perceived as political enemies by the rulers of the day. Human and civil rights in India are in danger today, and all-out effort is needed to redeem the dreams of the founders of independent India, which is now being ruined by a retrograde fascist ideology. I have not lost hope, but I know and realize that a very long struggle lies ahead. Thank you very much.
So I think the last line that our doctor, he said that he hasn't lost hope. And through all of this, I think hope is definitely a theme, that once the community, they lose hope, I think that's a point where they lose everything, right? And if they have hope, then they have opportunity, they have space to create movements, to create platforms that they can speak up on, that they can raise their voice and hopefully gain justice through the long run. Obviously, this isn't just a short fight. This is something that we're going to have to keep fighting in order to gain justice for the minorities of India. Next up, we have Safura Zargar, who is an Indian Muslim leader best known for brave activism against the CAA, for which she was jailed by the Indian government under false and fabricated terror and sedation charges. We see this happening with many young activists who are put under these false charges and then jailed. Safura was actually given bail, though, alhamdulillah, last year on humanitarian grounds after an international outrage of her imprisonment. But I just kind of, before we get into our video, I want to point out that there are so many like Safura who were imprisoned and who are still imprisoned because they didn't get that international outrage. You know, alhamdulillah, she was able to get bail, but there are so many still young Muslims, young people, young activists who are in prison only because they have spoken truth to power. And I think that's something that we should definitely keep in mind while listening to Safura. So if we can play her video, inshallah.
Every year on Independence Day, we commemorate our freedom fighters. We revisit their sacrifices that they have made for the nation. And every year we feel proud to be an Indian, and that is how we celebrate Independence Day. But this Independence Day, I would urge you all to think that this freedom that we are celebrating on Independence Day, it did not come easy, It is hard earned. Our freedom fighters, they sacrificed a lot to earn this freedom for us. And we do celebrate it every year. But do we celebrate the spirit that they fought for? Today in India, the identity of being from a particular religion, that is being a Hindu, has become paramount. It is supreme. Even so much so that, it has superseded the sacredness of being an Indian, and we question the Indianness of every person around us solely on the basis of what religion they belong to, what caste they belong to, sometimes even what educational institutions they go to, and that is how we are, we are superseding our identities, such as our castes, our religion, and all of these things, the places that we belong to, our first names, our surnames, our clothes, all of these have overshadowed the idea of, India today. I don't think that, if our freedom fighters that we are celebrating would have been alive today, they would have just stood by and, watched all of this happen. Would they have stood by and watched innocent people being lynched, publicly lynched? Would they have stood by and watched the whitewashing of the rapes of Dalit women by cremating their bodies overnight? I don't think so. And there are many people today who have refused to stand by and watch this. Those people, I would say, are the real freedom fighters of India in 21st century, in today's India. And they are languishing behind bars while we commemorate 75 years of independence. We have put innocent people behind bars solely because they decided to follow the steps of our freedom fighters. They are fighting to save democracy. They are fighting to save the spirit of India. They are fighting to save the diversity of India, and that is their only crime. And we have criminalized such people. We have criminalized such prisoners. We have these prisoners of conscience. We have punished them, and we have been vindictive towards them as a country. I think 75 years should have been a long time to understand, on what ideals that democracy stands for. What is, the idea of India? Is the idea of India being a Hindu? I don't think so. The idea of India is being an Indian, and anybody, irrespective of what religion they belong to, what caste they belong to, what color they have, where they come from. They can be an Indian. And I think this idea should not have been diminished. But in today's India, this idea has completely been diminished. In fact, this idea has been criminalized. And I would say that we are not only on the verge of fascism, we have crossed over to fascism. You know, where we are being surveilled 24 hours, where the voice of the opposition is being shut down completely, where the press is gagged. Journalists are intimidated, they fear for their lives. And the price of activism for political participation, for criticizing the government is so much so that anybody is afraid to, an average Indian today is afraid to raise their voice, to question the government, to seek accountability. That is the hallmark of a democracy. So to say that we are on the verge of fascism would be, fooling ourselves, because we have actually crossed over to fascism. Today, when we celebrate 75 years of independence, I would urge all Indians to at least give it a thought or two, that what kind of a country do we want to be? What kind of a democracy do we even want to be a democracy? If you want to be a democracy, are we even a democracy today? Why is it very important to fight for this democracy? Because this freedom, this democracy, this has been earned, with a lot of blood and sweat, and that is what we commemorate on every Independence Day. But when it comes to talking about the current situation of the country, we don't even speak out. We don't even support those who speak out. I would like to urge all of you to think about all of these things on these Independence Day, and happy Independence Day to all.
Next up, we have, lastly actually, but certainly not least, Hussain Hydari, who's an Indian spoken word poet, one of my favorite poets actually, a writer, a lyricist. He gained prominence for a spoken word poem titled Hindustani Musalman. I'm sure many people in the audience have heard of it. He's written lyrics for many Bollywood films and is known for using social media to speak truth to power. Hussain Hydari is our final speaker.
आदाब, मेरा नाम हुसैन हैदरी है और मैं एक शायर, गीतकार और लेखक हूँ। और IAMC में सबको और सभी देखने वालों को आज़ादी के जश्न, आज़ादी की सालगिरह बहुत बहुत मुबारक हो। कोई तकरीर करना शायद मैं ठीक नहीं समझता हूँ, क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल से बहुत सारे लोग बोल के गए होंगे, तो मैं वही करता हूँ जो मैं कर सकता हूँ, जो कि शायरी सुनाना। तो मैं 2 नज़में सुनाना चाहूँगा आपको। पहली नज़्म का उन्वान है हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान। सड़क पे शाम को चलते वक्त जो अज़ां सुनाई दी मुझको, तो याद आया कि वक्त है क्या, और बात जहन में ये आई, मैं कैसा मुसलमान हूँ भाई। मैं शिया हूँ या सुन्नी हूँ, मैं खोजा हूँ या बोहरी हूँ, मैं गांव से हूँ या शहरी हूँ, मैं बागी हूँ या सूफी हूँ, मैं कौमी हूँ या ढोंगी हूँ, मैं कैसा मुसलमान हूँ भाई। मैं सजदा करने वाला हूँ या झटका खाने वाला हूँ, मैं टोपी पहन के फिरता हूँ या दाढ़ी उड़ा के रहता हूँ, मैं आयत कौल से पढ़ता हूँ या फिल्मी गाने रमता हूँ, मैं अल्लाह अल्लाह करता हूँ या शेखों से लड़ पड़ता हूँ, मैं कैसा मुसलमान हूँ भाई। मैं हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हूँ। दक्कन से हूँ, यूपी से हूँ, भोपाल से हूँ, दिल्ली से हूँ, बंगाल से हूँ, गुजरात से हूँ, हर ऊंची नीची जात से हूँ। मैं ही हूँ जुलाहा मोची भी, मैं डॉक्टर भी हूँ, दर्जी भी, मुझमें गीता का सार भी है, एक उर्दू का अखबार भी है, मेरा एक महीना रमजान भी है, मैंने किया तो गंगा स्नान भी है, अपने ही तौर से जीता हूँ, 1-2 सिगरेट भी पीता हूँ, कोई नेता मेरी नस नस में नहीं, मैं किसी पार्टी के बस में नहीं, मैं हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हूँ। खूनी दरवाजा मुझ में है, एक भूल भुलैया मुझ में है, मैं बाबरी का एक गुंबद हूँ, मैं शहर के बीच में सरहद हूँ, झुग्गियों में पलती गुर्बत मैं, मदरसों की टूटी सी छत मैं, दंगों में भड़कता शोला मैं, कुर्ते पर खून का धब्बा मैं हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हूँ। मंदिर की चौखट मेरी है, मस्जिद के किबले मेरे हैं, गुरुद्वारे के दरबार मेरे, यीशु के गिरजे मेरे हैं। 100 में से 14 हूँ लेकिन 14 ये कम नहीं पड़ते हैं। मैं पूरे 100 में बसता हूँ, पूरे 100 मुझ में बसते हैं। मुझे एक नजर से देख न तू, मेरे एक नहीं 100 चेहरे हैं। 100 रंग के हैं किरदार मेरे, 100 कलम से लिखी कहानी हूँ। मैं जितना मुसलमान हूँ भाई, मैं उतना हिंदुस्तानी हूँ। मैं हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हूँ, मैं हिंदुस्तानी मुसलमान हूँ। ये एक नज़्म थी पहले की मैं कौन हूँ और हिंदुस्तान में मेरी क्या सोशल इकोनॉमिक लोकेशन है और हालात क्या है हिंदुस्तान में, और मैं क्या कह सकता हूँ एक उम्मीद के साथ। तो हालात क्या है हिंदुस्तान में तो आप जानते होंगे, मगर मैं क्या कह सकता हूँ एक उम्मीद के साथ। तो एक एड्रेसल है, एक प्ली ऑफ ये जो नफरत का दौर है जहाँ से आ रहा है, उन लोगों से बोल रहा हूँ कि अभी तुम लौट सकते हो जो समाज से आ रहा है। इस नज़्म का अनुमान है अभी तुम लौट सकते हो, अभी कुछ वक्त बाकी है, अभी तुम लौट सकते हो, अभी कुछ वक्त बाकी है, अभी तुम लौट सकते हो। अभी नफरत की जो आग है हर सू नहीं फैली, अभी तक बस घरों में है, अभी ये बुझ भी सकती है। अभी तक खून की ये प्यास हर लब पर नहीं आई, अभी ये घूट भरी है, अभी ये मिट भी सकती है। अभी तक जो दीवारें तुमने बनवाई है रंजिश में, तुम्हारे कद से नीची हैं, उन्हें तुम लांघ सकते हो। अभी ये आग और ये प्यास और दीवार की फिक्रें तुम्हारी दस्तरस में हैं, ये बेकाबू हो इससे पहले इनको बांध सकते हो। तुम्हारे हाथ में है कि जो आने वाली नस्लें हैं वो इसके रंज ना ढोएं। तुम्हारे हाथ में है कि जो आने वाली नस्लें हैं वो इसके रंज ना ढोए। जो तारीखें लिखेंगे अब वो इसकी शर्म ना झेलें। तुम्हें तुम्हें ही तय ये करना है, तुम्हीं पर अब ये जिम्मा है। अभी कुछ वक्त बाकी है, अभी तुम लौट सकते हो, अभी तुम लौट सकते हो। बहुत शुक्रिया सबका, और आपको फिर से आज़ादी की सालगिरह बहुत।
You know, I've never been more grateful to my grandparents for making sure that my Urdu was strong, and I'm so grateful to have understood that. And I think, you know, probably most of the people in the audience did understand how he was talking about the fact that, you know, India is a country. What I got from it was India is a country that is rich with multiple people, with various people of different backgrounds, whether it be, you know, different religious backgrounds or their backgrounds in terms of culture. So, you know, I listened to him outside of this too. He's absolutely phenomenal and eloquent. So that actually concludes this segment, and Safa will continue on from here. I'll just hand it back to you.
Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much. So again, I want to reiterate, thank you so much to everyone who sent in their videos, these amazing, brave, and truly like some of the greatest fighters that we have for our cause. Immense respect to their bravery and for their eloquence as well. And of course, since we've heard so much beautiful poetry, it only makes sense that we now transition into perhaps one of the most iconic poems and now songs in all of India, which is the national anthem. And we will be performing it as well as doing a virtual flag hoisting, as was mentioned before. But before we do that, I just want to give a very quick history of Jana Gana Mana. So this song was actually it's the first stanza of a longer poem written by Rabindranath Tagore, who participated in the Indian nationalist movement and was a friend of Gandhi, and he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913. The song was first performed in 1911 during a session held by the Indian National Congress in Calcutta and became the official national anthem of India in 1950. So very briefly, I'll just read a translation of the song, and then we can hear it in all its original glory. So, you are the ruler of the minds of all people, dispenser of India's destiny. Your name rouses the hearts of Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, of Dravida, Orissa, and Bengal. It echoes in the hills of the Vindhyas and Himalayas, mingles in the music of the Yamuna and the Ganga, and is chanted by the waves of the Indian Sea. They pray for your blessings and sing your praise. The saving of all people waits in your hand, you dispenser of India's destiny. Victory, victory, victory to thee.
Thank you. Thank you. That was wonderful.
And Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I think now we can go to the next part of the ceremony. We want to go and do the virtual flag hosting. So let me
Yeah,
just.
so I was going to mention that. I think, Safa, I think we're going to do the virtual flag hoisting, which is, this is the iconic flag hosting by the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru. And then after that, inshallah, we can do the singing of the national anthem.
Okay, and the next thing is we are all going to be singing the national anthem of India. So let me put it on the screen. And I would like to request everyone to please stand up in for the national anthem of India, and then we can all go and sing it, inshallah. So what I will be doing is I'm actually going to run the instrumental version of the Indian national anthem, and all of us are going to be singing that. Okay. Here I'm starting. Let me do it one more time from the beginning. And I'm going to make the music a little lighter so that our voice can also be heard. Jan Jan Man Adhinayak Jaya. Sorry. One more time. Jan Gan Man Adhinayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Punjab Sindh Gujarat Maratha Dravida Uttal Ganga Vindhya Himachal Yamuna Ganga Uchchal Jaldi Taranga Tab shubh naame jaage Tab shubh aashish maange Gahe tab jagata Jan Gan Mangal Dayak Jaya He Bharat Bhagya Vidhata Jaya He Jaya He Jaya He Jaya Jaya
Jaya He. Thank you, Mohan Bhai. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.
I didn't know that our president was also a great singer as well.
I was just following Mohan Bhai's cue.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Okay, and I think actually that was the last part of our presentation. And Syed Bhai, you want to say something, or maybe I can do some concluding remarks?
No, Himayan bhai, thank you. Please go ahead and conclude. I just want to say that, mashallah, I'm so proud and happy of of our staff, of the volunteers who helped us put together this program. Jazakallah khair to everyone. Sister Safa, Sister Amina, Ajit bhai, a wonderful job. I'd like to thank our invited guest speakers, Ubaidur Rahman bhai and Zafarul Islam bhai, Dr. Shamsul Islam bhai. Thank you, Jazakallah khair, for your time with us today. Really appreciate it. Jazakallah khair.
Okay, Jazakallah khair, Syed Bhai.
Yeah.
One more time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. My name is Humayun Rashid, and I am the National General Secretary of Indian American Muslim Council. And we are now drawing to a close of our Independence Day celebrations today. And for years, IAMC has organized these celebrations in person, but for the last 2 years, we have been forced to do them virtually because of the COVID-19 situation. So on behalf of my organization, as well as the Indian American community, I would like to thank everyone who joined today in our celebrations. Our special thank goes to Dr. Shamsul Islam Sahab, former professor of Delhi University, for his brilliant presentation. Jazakallah khair, Dr. On the role of the Muslims in India's freedom struggle. As every Indian Muslim knows, our role in India's freedom struggle was no less than any other community. Thousands of Muslims laid their lives or suffered years of incarceration to liberate our country. I also extend my gratitude to Sayyid Ubaidur Rahman Sahab, Jazakallah khair, brother, for his wonderful exposition on the role of Muslims in India. I would like to highly recommend that our viewers to secure for themselves the various books written by our two esteemed speakers, Dr. Shamsul Islam Sahab and Dr. Rahman Sahab, to learn more about the tremendous contribution of the Muslims in India's culture and freedom. And a very big thank you also to Dr. Zafarul Islam Sahab, Khan Sahab, the former chairman of Delhi Minorities Commission and Indian stalwart intellectuals, Sister Safura Zargar, Nabia Khan, Faiza, and their tremendous role in the fight against the unjust CAA Citizenship Amendment Act. Inshallah, as a true Indian patriots, they are leading from the front in the fight against the majoritarianism and sectarianism that is threatening India's secular constitution. And of course, it was a delight to hear the poet Hussain Haidari today. And I also recall one of the sher which I would like to say. It's going very popular these days. कि ये बात हवाओं को बताए रखना, रोशनी होगी चिरागों को जलाए रखना, लहू देकर जिसकी हिफाजत हमने की, ऐसे तिरंगे को सदा दिल में बसाए रखना. And today's celebration for the Indian American Muslim Council has been possible with the efforts and a lot of volunteers across the US and India also. There are too many to name here individually, so allow me to thank all of them jointly. And we have absolutely no doubt that truth and justice will eventually going to prevail in India, inshallah. The bigotry and xenophobia currently on display in India is the single biggest threat to India's continued existence as a free and a fair nation. As Abraham Lincoln has said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. We are reassured by millions of Hindus who have boldly come out in support of India's pluralism and against xenophobia and hatred. India's Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and the members of all faiths, as well as its atheists, are all together one unit. Inshallah, we pray for the soul and well-being of India that was founded by Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, Baba Sahib Ambedkar, Subhash Chandra Bose, and thousands of other leaders who led us to the freedom. One more time, Jazakallah khair. Thank you, everyone, and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.